Good evening. My name is Dennis Garcia. I'm the owner and curator and director of Ventana Gallery at 48 Washington in Sonora. This series is going to comprise of artists being interviewed as well as looking at their works of art and even them working and executing a piece that they will demonstrate for us. At the beginning of the series, we have our artist today, who is one of the 45 artists that are renting at the Ventana Gallery. The Ventana Gallery is like a service to our artists and community, in that the artists receive full proceeds as they rent into space. Unlike a cooperative, they do not have to gallery sit meetings, and they're there on a month-to-month basis based on what they like and what they get out of the gallery. We do have, in developing a website, we have email to our artists, and we also offer other services that the artists have available to give to our general public. There's restorations of art, there are art framers that artists do, there are muralists in our group, some do faux finishing on furniture. So we have such a variety of artists as well as their own work hanging in the gallery. And today, starting with the series, we're going to be talking to Patrick Borden. Actually, it's Patty. I just gave her that name some time ago, but anyway. And this is Patty, and Patty's going to be our first in the series, and she'll be exhibited in the Channel 8 show in October in the evening, so you'll need to look that up at what times they are. And so today, Patty, I know you had some experience in your development as an artist, but you also were pursuing another career for a little bit, or pursuing another area of interest that you had at one time.
As far as working goes, or art?
Well, I understand you were something about marketing.
Oh yes, I throughout college was a business major with an emphasis in marketing and advertising, and started taking a lot of design courses that related to marketing and advertising, and most of my working life was spent in that field, marketing a variety of things.
Okay. So what got you more into doing art? Were there individuals that influenced you? I know you mentioned a few people that had given you a directive in the way that you were pursuing and learned from them. And who were those people?
Well, it started probably when I was really a little kid. My grandmother was an artist and an author and a teacher, and she started instructing me in oil painting. When I was 9 or 10, she gave me my first set and showed me how to use it. Yeah. And she was always showing me how to use pastels, charcoals, a variety of media. And that was probably where I first got interested there, and in preschool. I still remember standing in front of that easel, you know, with the little apron on, trying to decide which pot of paint was I going to put that brush in to. So, and then since then, I continued my education through college, even though business was my major. Right. I continued with art classes, and I always considered art to be something I did outside of work at that point. It was a sideline. It was something I pursued evenings, weekends, that sort of thing. But I was always pursuing a variety of types and studies in art.
Yeah, I know we tend to wear several hats as we go through college. Mine was engineering and mathematics and science, and then all of a sudden, somewhere along, I was taking classes of art. And so I thought I'd just mention that occasionally we're not always artists to begin with, but then that's the area that we end up pursuing for the rest of our life. And I just wanted to quote Leonora Cunningham, that stated that making art is not something we do, but like hunger, it's something we need to do. And I thought that's pretty good, because we have that drive to keep executing our own work. Well, I think that what we want to do is just see some of your work, and maybe even a demonstration that you might have us to do today.
That's great.
Okay.
This is almost at the request of Dennis. What I have here, I'll start with preparation of the board, and I'll show you different stages in one of my techniques for painting. And I end up with multi-layers and of texture, paint, glazes, and sometimes it can be as many as 30 layers going on when you get to the end. And on this particular piece of canvas, I've done an underpainting and under texture, let all of that dry. And part of, you can see that some of the texture is showing through and some just a hint of the paint, and maybe I might have done some writing under here and just a hint of that will show up. And it's just part of my preparing my painting. And I might add that I dance to Cajun music when I'm doing this, so there's lots of energy transferred into the painting. Normally when I paint, I have music on very loud. I move all the way around. I don't sit on one side of the canvas and just work from one side.
What kind of music?
And Cajun music. Cajun music, sometimes the blues, but Cajun blues, sometimes jazz.
All right.
So, but I usually start and end. Now, I do a lot of experimenting and playing with paint, and this is gelatin, like you would eat, only this isn't flavored, it's just plain gelatin. It's mixed 2 tablespoons to a cup of water and then let harden in the refrigerator. And it will keep for about 2 weeks covered in the refrigerator, and you can use it as a printing plate. And that's what I'm going to do in part of this painting. I've got my surface all prepared, and now I will use the gelatin as my printing plate. Let's hope this is another experiment. Let's hope this works good. So I used paper palettes when I'm doing my printing. And then I pick up paint with a brayer, spread it around, try and get it even on the brayer. And then I'm going to put it onto the gelatin. This is just another way of putting paint onto canvas or paper. Now, normally I would use this method to print something that looks like this on paper. Very simple. You've put your paint on the Jello, then you put a circle of cardboard, some pieces of grass, and do your first color. And then you'll take all of that off, wipe it off, and use a second color, which in this case, the second color was black, the first color was turquoise blue. Here's another example. All right, and that's typically how I use my gel printing plate.
You're going to demonstrate right now?
Now I'm going to show you how I use it on canvas.
Wow.
And truthfully, what I want to do is I'm going to remove some of what I put on here, and I'm going to do that with something like this. I don't want the shape quite what I've got going. In the series of paintings that you're going to see develop, I am using a receptacle for flowers, if you will. And so I didn't want that square shape. I wanted more of a rectangular shape. And then I'm going to add some texture to this paint. It already has some going on simply because of the gelatin. It is not perfectly smooth. Wait, let me remove this. I'm gonna turn my back and go to the sink for a minute.
Does this only make one print, or can you make multiple?
On the gelatin,
yes.
This piece of gelatin I can do multiple prints.
Where did the idea of gelatin go? I was curious about it.
I saw an article on printing with gelatin on the internet and thought, I should pursue that. Actually, I take that back. Somebody asked me, and I don't remember who. I thought it was Jane, my girlfriend Jane, who's also a painter. And I thought it was Jane that had asked me, have you ever printed using gelatin as your printing plate? And I said no. And so I looked it up on the internet. You can get so much information on the internet. Now I've got a texture brayer that I'm just gonna remove some paint with this. Now, I tend to be more abstract in my paintings. Excuse me again. I'm not worried about this being perfectly straight edges. All of this will get changed around when I finish the painting in one layer or another. So now I'm just showing you one portion, and that is printing the receptacle for my flowers. And I have to think backwards. I want it over to this side of my canvas. So I'm going to put my canvas, I'm thinking upside down and backwards. And I also want to think about how high up I want the top of that to be and make an adjustment for that. So, and if it doesn't work and isn't where I want it, I can wash it off. It's acrylic. All right.
So you're saying more or less you do exploratory work with your
Yes. All right. This is the placement. This is just one step. Now, very quickly, I'm going to put my Jell-O behind, over to the side. Let me see. What I wanted to do here, before that gets too dry, I don't want it quite such solid blue. I'm going to take some rubbing alcohol while the blue is wet, I'm hoping. May not be. And drop it in, and if it were wetter, I would reveal more. What I will do, and you'll see in my next step with another canvas, that I will start changing this blue. This blue is going to dry, and it's going to be very bright. It's going to be brighter than I want. The effect I'm going to go for in these paintings is the receptacles are going to have the emphasis, not the flowers. And that's why I broke a rule and I set them on the edge of the canvas. Instead of setting them back into the picture plane, they're forward because I want them emphasized. They're going to be textured. They're going to have the look of an old Chinese piece of pottery by the time I finish. It started with a Jell-O print. It will end up something completely different once I'm done with it. All right, I'm going to show you how easy it is to clean these, and I'm going to put that away, and then I'm going to be switching to a different canvas that I've already let dry. I finger painted on the next canvas. I finger painted on my gelatin. All right, Jell-O goes back, and you can put it in the refrigerator. You don't have to wash the paint off. If you want to leave it on for interesting effects later, you can do that too. So I just put it back in a pan, cover it up, and stick it in the fridge, and I can use it over and over, and you saw how easily it just wiped up. I'm going to kind of clean that up a little bit. I'm going to switch this out. Should I mention, I'm going to just switch it with this. Oh, I could mention here that normally I wait for this to dry, and then in this series of paintings, I am using a professional jelly plate. Yes, they make them to print the floral areas, and I'm mostly finger painting on the gel plate and then printing onto the canvas. And at this point, it's very bright. Everything's dry and it's ready for the next stage, which is just one of many. Now I'm going to set this down. I'm going to switch some materials around, but if you want, I know you're going to edit this. Do you want, I can show you what a professional gel plate looks like, if you want. Rod, do you want?
Go ahead.
Okay. I mentioned the professional gel plate. This one is by Jelly Arts. And it has the same feel. I can just move some of these things. Only you can pick it up and it's not going to tear like your gelatin. And it's,
Wow.
so it has that soft feel to it. You notice what nice, the reason I prefer the soft, you see the clean edges I got printing this, that's because this has give to it. And that give allows you to almost have a photo imprint of what you put on it. So that's just one of the exciting things about using gelatin or this commercial jelly plate. Right. I mentioned earlier that I wanted the receptacles to look like antique or old cracked pottery. And this is simply my gel imprints dried. And at the next stage, and this is going to be very quick, the next stage I mix gesso, which is usually used as a background on canvas, and canvases come prepared, already gessoed, or you can have them without. But it's also a good tool to use within a painting. If you mix a very thin wash, you can use it to give a fogged look. An example, which the mountains up here are white gesso with fog. The mountains aren't the fog, the snow, the cloud, all of that effect is done with white gesso rather than paint. It has a quality when it's on an over paint of being able to see through it if you mix it with enough water.
So it's translucent in the sense.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's light through.
Yeah, so, and it will you can just let some of what's underneath show through, and it's a very good permanent ground for then adding another color. Whereas some of your white acrylic paints might get too glossy a finish, the gesso won't. It depends on what effect you want on your top layers. Brush. All right, and I have mixed gesso with water, with quite a bit of water, because I want this blue to really soften up, and I'm going to bring sort of a floral print into it using rubbing alcohol, which is something I learned. I did watercolor painting for about 10 years. What I'm about to do here is begin just the process of toning down the colors in this vase, and I'm going to start with the mixture of the white gesso and water. And at this point, it's going to go to an opaque and much toned down color of blue. And then I'm going to, and I lost my rubbing alcohol. It's in a class. I'm sorry. Okay. While that gesso is wet, I'm going to drop in, I don't know if you can see that.
What does it do, Stu?
If you come and look, Dennis, you'll see it, rubbing alcohol displaces water. Now, you see where I'm bringing back some of the bright blue in some areas. And I want it to go off the edge of the...
So it's dispersing the paint.
Yes.
The water and alcohol are not really mixing.
Yes.
So it's like water and oil.
And then what will happen, yes. And so some of this will stay bright blue underneath and some will be duller blue. And when I go in with my next layer of glazing, what will happen is those spots where I dropped in that rubbing alcohol are going to all of a sudden blossom. They'll turn into flowers. Yeah, you can't even see them right now. And so I'll do layer over layer of that when I'm doing these florals. And over here to my side is an example of a floral where I use this technique in the background, a lot in the background. You'll see all the different colors. The printing I used in the vase on this one was paper towel and paint, and printed the shape I wanted. Actually, I cut the paper towel into the shape I wanted and used that as my printing press, so to speak. And it's just another way. And in these flowers, I did once I had my background where I wanted it, what I wanted to show up as leaves, etc., then I took my gesso mixed with water and actually used a brush to do a shape. I call this white hydrangeas. Now do you see hydrangeas? Now that you look at it. Did my overall shape and size and dropped in, one finger at a time, a drop of rubbing alcohol to get it to disperse and create these areas within the white gesso. And that's how I got my hydrangeas.
Now, you didn't use a still life to do it, with just all
No, this is meant.
imagination of a pot and your flowers, because you know you're Andreas.
Yes, my hydrangeas. Yes, I have them growing right outside the front door.
Now, this would, in my interpretation of what you because you use the word abstract in your writings, to me this would be an abstract
Yes.
of a flower arrangement.
Yes.
But because you're abstracting from a real thing, which you now have in your head, to another form, but it's not quite a still life as, say, a realist would paint it, or a representative.
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely not as a realist would paint it. And some people don't see this as hydrangeas, even after I tell them the name of the painting is white hydrangeas. One of my sisters sees this as sunlight hitting the surface of a pond, and these are water lilies or something of that fashion floating on the pond. But a lot of my paintings, that's one of the things that I like about doing them, the way I do them, is that people will see what they want to see or what they'd like to see. The painting is not so set that there's only, yes, it's abstracted enough to where people can use their own imagination and go deeper into the painting and put what they want in there. No, that's me.
Patty, I wanted to ask you, because I mentioned something about you're explaining and describing what an abstract was in terms of where you're working in a still life with flowers in a pot, but yet it's not so definite. And so, but I wanted to also, I saw this one down below there, and you know, when you were executing this piece, was there some idea about still life, or is this, would you call it an abstract or non-objective in terms of just color and?
It began as non-objective in my mind. When I began painting it, it was a matter of color first and then lines and their relationships to each other. And when I finished, I saw a Paris cafe street scene.
Okay. Well, that's interpretation of your own.
That's my own, yes. But when I was painting it, it was the relationships of the colors to each other, the lines to each other, and the flow within the painting. So it was definitely, what would you call that? When something has non-objective?
Non-objective.
Non-objective.
But one of the things that I really was concerned with all your work is that you really explore the elements of design. Color, texture, line, some spatial arrangement. So that's your main focus, as
Yes.
opposed to, say, doing impressionism or representational, although let's look at some of these behind us.
Oh.
Which, now, are these earlier works? or-
This was in the middle of doing abstracts and non-representational abstracts. Took me several years to feel comfortable with and learn to do it. And in the middle of doing that, I let my inner child out to play.
Okay.
And my inner child came out and picked the colors and picked the shapes. And I believe they even picked the musical instruments, beginning with the composition of the keyboard. The other thing, when I painted these three paintings, is that I painted them as if nobody would ever see them. And now they're
Now they're in public
now
view.
they're in public
Well, thank
view.
you, Patty, and I think that we really enjoyed the demonstration and a little of what you're doing here. And I'm excited that you're in the gallery, and I think a few pieces have moved from the gallery for you. So I'm just delighted to be the first to come and see this beginning of our series, and so maybe we can do this again some years down the road, and we'll have a grand opening show of all your work.
No, and see what I'm up to then.
Yes. Take care.
Thank you,
Thank you
Dennis.
very much.